They thought he was finished. They thought the betrayals, the injuries, the corporate manipulation had finally broken the man they once called the tribal chief. WWE executives were already rewriting WrestlePalooza 2025 around his absence. His so-called bloodline family had abandoned him for dead, and the wrestling world had written his obituary before his body was even cold. But Roman Reigns just proved that reports of his demise were greatly exaggerated, and what happened at WrestlePalooza 2025 will go down as the most shocking, most brutal, most perfectly executed act of revenge in wrestling history, because he didn't just return, he brought a new Shield member that nobody saw coming, and together they destroyed everything that betrayed him. The lies started unraveling the moment Roman's music hit. For weeks, WWE had been selling the narrative that their former golden boy was too broken to compete, too damaged by his mysterious hospitalization to fulfill his contractual obligations. They'd restructured their entire WrestlePalooza card around his absence, promoted alternative main events, and assured investors that the show would go on without their former franchise player. The corporate spin machine had been working overtime to convince everyone that Roman Reigns was yesterday's news. Then the lights went out in MetLife Stadium, and 82,000 fans lost their collective minds. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Cole's voice cracked with genuine shock as Roman's entrance music thundered through the arena. That's Roman Reigns. The tribal chief is here. He's supposed to be. But Cole couldn't finish his sentence because what was happening in that ring defied every piece of information WWE had fed to their announcers, their media partners, and their fans. Roman Reigns wasn't just back, he was back with a vengeance that would make Shakespearean tragedies look like children's bedtime stories. But here's where the story gets absolutely nuclear. Roman didn't return alone. As he stood in that ring, microphone in hand, looking healthier and more dangerous than he'd appeared in months, the crowd was still trying to process his miraculous recovery when he dropped the bombshell that changed everything. "I told you I'd be back." Roman's voice carried the weight of a man who'd been pushed beyond his breaking point and found something darker on the other side. "But I didn't tell you I'd be bringing a friend. Someone who understands what it's like to be used by this company, chewed up and spit out when you're no longer useful. Someone who knows exactly what it feels like to have your so-called family turn their backs on you when you need them most." The anticipation in that stadium was suffocating. 82,000 people holding their breath, waiting to see who Roman had recruited for his war against everyone who had wronged him. The smart money was on a returning legend, maybe a surprise debut from another company, possibly even Dean Ambrose making his long-awaited WWE comeback to reunite the Shield. Nobody, and I mean nobody, was prepared for what actually happened. "Ladies and gentlemen," Roman continued, his voice dripping with the kind of cold fury that can only come from betrayal, "let me introduce you to the newest member of the Shield, Jacob Fatu." The roof nearly came off MetLife Stadium. The man who had risked his own career to expose WWE's treatment of Roman during his hospitalization, the cousin who had been the only person to visit him when everyone else abandoned him, was now standing shoulder to shoulder with the tribal chief wearing Shield tactical gear and carrying the kind of rage that could level cities. But this wasn't just a reunion story or a feel-good moment about family loyalty. This was the beginning of a systematic destruction campaign that would target every person, every institution, and every corporate structure that had failed Roman when he needed them most. "You want to know what happened in that hospital?" Roman's voice cut through the deafening crowd noise like a sword through silk. "You want to know the real reason I was laid up for weeks while you vultures circled my career like I was already dead? It wasn't exhaustion. It wasn't dehydration. It was poisoning." The silence that followed was deafening. 82,000 people processing the implications of what Roman had just revealed, while millions more watching on television tried to comprehend the magnitude of his accusation. WWE's camera operators scrambled to cut away from crowd shots showing fans with their mouths hanging open in shock. "That's right," Roman continued, his anger building with every word. "Someone in WWE's inner circle decided that the best way to get rid of Roman Reigns was to slip something into my pre-workout supplements. Something that would make me sick enough to miss WrestlePalooza, sick enough to lose my championship, sick enough to be written off television permanently." The accusation hit the wrestling world like a nuclear bomb. Roman Reigns wasn't just claiming that WWE had neglected him during his illness, he was claiming that someone within the company had deliberately poisoned him to remove him from the championship picture. Jacob Fatu stepped forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over the ring as he took the microphone from his cousin. "I was there," his voice boomed through the arena's sound system. "I was the only one there when Roman was fighting for his life, and I saw the evidence. I saw the lab reports that WWE tried to bury, the security footage they tried to delete, the medical records they classified as confidential. This was the moment that transformed WrestlePalooza 2025 from a wrestling show into a public trial." Fatu wasn't just backing up Roman's claims, he was providing the kind of specific details that suggested they had actual proof of their explosive allegations. "We have names," Fatu continued, his words carrying the weight of an executioner's axe. "We have dates, times, security camera footage showing exactly who had access to Roman's supplements and exactly when they were tampered with. We have medical evidence proving that what put Roman in that hospital wasn't natural exhaustion, it was deliberate sabotage." The implications were staggering. If Roman and Jacob were telling the truth, WWE hadn't just neglected their biggest star, they had actively participated in a conspiracy to poison him. The legal ramifications alone could destroy the company, but the moral implications were even more devastating. But Roman wasn't finished with his revelations. "You want to know who was behind it?" he asked, his voice carrying the kind of quiet menace that makes smart people run for cover. "You want to know which member of my so-called bloodline family sold me out to WWE's board of directors because they thought they deserved my spot more than I did?" The camera panned across the crowd, showing faces frozen in anticipation and horror. This wasn't just wrestling storyline drama, this felt real, raw, and dangerous in a way that transcended entertainment. "Solo Sikoa," Roman's voice cut through the arena like a death sentence. "My own cousin, the man I brought into this business, the wrestler I elevated from developmental nobody to main event player, made a deal with WWE executives to have me removed from the championship picture permanently." The betrayal accusation was devastating enough on its own, but Roman wasn't finished destroying his former family member's reputation. "Solo thought if he could get me out of the way, WWE would hand him my spot as the head of the bloodline. He thought he could poison his own cousin, watch me suffer in a hospital bed, and then step into my shoes like nothing happened." Jacob Fatu's massive fists were clenched as he added his own perspective to the accusations. "I watched Solo celebrate at that nightclub while Roman was fighting for his life. I saw him laughing, buying drinks for everyone, acting like he'd just won the lottery while his cousin was hooked up to machines trying to figure out what was killing him from the inside." The image Fatu painted was absolutely sickening: Solo Sikoa partying while Roman suffered, celebrating what he thought was the successful elimination of his competition. If true, it represented family betrayal at its most calculating and cruel. But the new Shield wasn't just interested in exposing past betrayals, they were there to deliver immediate, brutal justice. "Solo," Roman called out, his voice echoing through the stadium, "I know you're watching backstage. I know you're probably figuring out how to explain your way out of this, how to spin your attempted murder into some kind of misunderstanding. But here's the thing, explanations are over. Excuses are over. Tonight, you pay for what you did." The challenge was issued, and the crowd erupted in anticipation of the confrontation that was about to unfold. But this wasn't going to be a traditional wrestling match with predetermined outcomes and choreographed spots. This was going to be a reckoning years in the making, fueled by genuine hatred and the kind of rage that can only come from family betrayal. Solo Sikoa's entrance music hit, but instead of his usual confident swagger, he walked to the ring like a man heading to his own execution. The guilt was written all over his face, the knowledge that his crimes had been exposed and his former victims were waiting for him with weapons and witnesses. "Roman," Solo's voice shook as he tried to maintain some semblance of control over the situation, "you don't understand what really happened. WWE made me an offer, but it wasn't to hurt you. They said they just wanted to give you time off, time to recover, time to what?" Roman's voice cut through Solo's pathetic attempt at explanation like a knife through butter. "Time to die quietly in a hospital room while you took over my legacy? Time to disappear from wrestling while you convinced everyone that you were the rightful tribal chief?" Jacob Fatu stepped forward, his massive frame towering over Solo as the crowd sensed that violence was imminent. "You poisoned your own cousin," Fatu's voice was barely controlled rage. "You looked him in the eye every day knowing that you were slowly killing him, and you smiled and pretended to be family while you counted down the days until he'd be gone." The confrontation was building to a crescendo that would define WrestlePalooza 2025, but Roman had one more revelation that would complete Solo's destruction. "You want to know the best part?" Roman's smile was cold and calculating. "You want to know why your plan failed so spectacularly?" Solo's face went pale as he realized that Roman had more ammunition to destroy him with. "I knew," Roman continued, savoring every word like fine wine. "I knew you were poisoning me almost from the beginning. The doctors figured it out during my second day in the hospital, and instead of confronting you immediately, I decided to let you dig your own grave. I let you think your plan was working while I built a case against you that would destroy your career and possibly put you in prison." The revelation that Roman had known about the poisoning and allowed it to continue was both brilliant and terrifying. It meant that everything Solo thought he'd accomplished was actually part of an elaborate trap designed to expose and destroy him. "Every day I was in that hospital, every moment of pain and fear and uncertainty, was me gathering evidence against you," Roman explained, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a master strategist who had played a long game to perfection. "The lab reports, the security footage, the witness statements, all of it designed to build an airtight case that would destroy you completely." Jacob Fatu's role in the plan became clear as he addressed the crowd and the millions watching on television. "While Solo thought he was getting away with attempted murder, I was documenting everything. Every lie he told, every fake concern text message he sent, every public statement about praying for Roman's recovery while privately celebrating what he thought was his successful elimination." The systematic nature of Roman and Jacob's revenge plan was both impressive and terrifying. They hadn't just stumbled upon evidence of Solo's betrayal, they had constructed an elaborate sting operation designed to expose him in the most public and devastating way possible. But the psychological warfare wasn't finished. Roman had saved his most damaging revelation for last, the one piece of information that would destroy Solo's reputation not just with wrestling fans, but with their entire extended family. You want to know what really hurts? Roman's voice took on a more personal tone, the anger giving way to genuine pain. It's not that you tried to poison me. It's not even that you betrayed our family for money and career advancement. It's that you made our grandmother cry. The mention of their grandmother, the family matriarch who had raised both men and instilled in them the values of loyalty and honor that Solo had abandoned, hit like a physical blow. The crowd could see Solo's face crumble as Roman continued his emotional destruction. She called me in the hospital, Roman continued, his voice heavy with the weight of family disappointment. Crying, asking me what she'd done wrong in raising you, wondering how one of her grandsons could try to kill another one for money. You broke that woman's heart, Solo. You made her question everything she taught us about family and loyalty and doing what's right. The image of their elderly grandmother crying over Solo's betrayal was devastating, adding a personal dimension to his crimes that transcended wrestling storylines and business conflicts. He hadn't just betrayed Roman, he had betrayed the woman who had made them both into men. Jacob Fatu's own family connection to the situation became clear as he addressed Solo directly. That woman raised all of us. Fatu's voice carried the weight of generational disappointment. She taught us that family comes first, that blood is thicker than water, that you never, ever turn your back on your own people. And you spit in her face for a WWE contract. The crowd was witnessing something unprecedented, a wrestling storyline that felt completely real, fueled by genuine emotions and family dynamics that couldn't be scripted or manufactured. The pain in Roman's voice, the rage in Jacob's demeanor, the guilt written all over Solo's face, all of it combined to create television that transcended sports entertainment. But Roman wasn't just there to expose Solo's crimes, he was there to exact justice. Here's what's going to happen, Roman announced, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had reclaimed control of his destiny. You're going to face consequences for what you did. Real consequences, not just wrestling storyline consequences. The threat of real-world repercussions elevated the entire confrontation beyond typical wrestling drama. Roman was essentially promising that Solo's actions would have consequences that extended far beyond the wrestling ring. Jacob and I are going to destroy your career, Roman continued, each word calculated for maximum damage. We're going to make sure that every wrestling company in the world knows exactly what kind of person you are. We're going to ensure that no legitimate promotion will ever hire you again. But career destruction was just the beginning of Solo's punishment. Roman had planned a more comprehensive form of revenge that would target every aspect of his cousin's life. We're also going to make sure that your attempted murder charge gets the attention it deserves, Roman announced, sending shockwaves through the arena and the wrestling industry. Poisoning someone is a felony in every state, and just because it happened in the context of professional wrestling doesn't mean you get a pass from law enforcement. The legal implications of Roman's threat were staggering. If he and Jacob actually had evidence of deliberate poisoning, Solo could be facing serious criminal charges that would result in prison time, not just career embarrassment. Jacob Fatu stepped forward to add his own promise of justice. We've already been in contact with federal investigators who specialize in cases involving deliberate poisoning and attempted murder, Fatu announced, his words hitting Solo like physical blows. Your WWE contract isn't going to protect you from the FBI. The mention of federal law enforcement involvement elevated the entire situation from wrestling drama to potential criminal investigation. The crowd was witnessing what might be the prelude to an actual arrest, not just storyline consequences. But Roman had saved his most personally devastating threat for last. And Solo, Roman's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, forcing the entire arena to strain to hear his words. We're going to make sure that grandmother knows exactly what you did to me. Every detail, every lie, every moment when you looked her in the eye and pretended to care about family while you were plotting to kill her grandson. The prospect of facing their grandmother's disappointment and anger seemed to affect Solo more than any of the professional or legal consequences he was facing. The strong family bonds that had defined their upbringing made her potential rejection the cruelest punishment Roman could inflict. Solo finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. Roman, please, he begged, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. You don't understand the pressure I was under. WWE made it clear that there was only room for one of us at the top, and they were going to choose you no matter what I did. But his attempt at explanation only fueled Roman's anger further. So you decided to eliminate the competition? Roman's voice rose with incredulous rage. You decided that poisoning your own cousin was a reasonable response to corporate politics? Jacob Fatu's massive frame shook with barely controlled violence as he addressed Solo's pathetic excuse. There are 1,000 ways you could have competed with Roman for that top spot, Fatu's voice boomed through the arena. You could have improved your wrestling, developed better storylines, worked harder to connect with fans. Instead, you chose attempted murder. The crowd was on their feet, sensing that the confrontation was building toward physical violence that would define WrestlePalooza 2025. But Roman had one more psychological weapon to deploy before the beating began. The funniest part, Roman said with a cold smile, is that your plan was doomed from the beginning. Even if you had succeeded in killing me, even if I had died in that hospital room, WWE never would have chosen you as my replacement. Solo's face showed confusion mixed with growing horror as Roman continued his psychological destruction. They told me about their real plans for you, Roman revealed, savoring Solo's growing panic. You were never going to be the new tribal chief. You were never going to get my spot at the top of the card. They were planning to use you as a transitional heel, someone they could build up just enough to be defeated by their real chosen replacement. The revelation that WWE had been playing Solo all along, using his jealousy and ambition to manipulate him into committing attempted murder for a position he was never going to receive, was the final nail in his psychological coffin. Cody Rhodes, Roman continued, watching Solo's face crumble with the realization of how completely he'd been manipulated. That's who they were always planning to put in my spot. You poisoned me, betrayed our family, and destroyed your own soul for absolutely nothing. Jacob Fatu's laughter was cold and merciless as he piled onto Solo's complete humiliation. You sold your soul to be WWE's patsy, Fatu observed with cruel accuracy. They used your jealousy to turn you into a weapon against your own family, and you were too stupid to realize that you were never going to benefit from it. The systematic destruction of Solo's dignity was complete, but Roman still had physical justice to deliver. The new Shield had exposed their enemy's crimes, destroyed his reputation, threatened him with legal consequences, and revealed him to be a pawn in corporate manipulation. Now it was time for violence. Jacob, Roman's voice carried the calm authority of a general giving orders to his most trusted lieutenant. Show Solo what happens to people who betray family. What followed was 3 minutes of the most brutal, most personal, most emotionally charged violence in WrestlePalooza history. Jacob Fatu, fueled by months of rage over Solo's betrayal and weeks of watching Roman suffer in a hospital bed, unleashed punishment that transcended professional wrestling and entered the realm of personal vengeance. Solo's screams echoed through MetLife Stadium as Jacob systematically destroyed every part of his body that had been involved in the poisoning plot. His hands, which had tampered with Roman's supplements. His feet, which had carried him to and from the crime scene. His back, which he had turned on family loyalty in favor of corporate advancement. But Roman wasn't content to let Jacob handle all the violence. This was personal, and he needed to deliver some of the punishment himself. This is for every night I spent in that hospital wondering if I was going to die, Roman snarled as he drove his fist into Solo's midsection with the force of months of built-up rage. This is for every moment of fear, every second of pain, every hour of wondering why my own family had abandoned me. The crowd was witnessing something unprecedented in modern wrestling, violence that felt completely real, fueled by genuine emotions that couldn't be manufactured or scripted. Roman's punches carried the weight of betrayal, family disappointment, and near-death experience. And this, Roman continued, positioning Solo for what appeared to be a devastating finishing move, is for making our grandmother cry. The final spear that Roman delivered to Solo carried the force of generational disappointment and family honor. It wasn't just a wrestling move, it was a statement about the consequences of betraying blood for money. As Solo lay motionless in the center of the ring, Roman and Jacob stood over him like avenging angels who had delivered divine justice. The new Shield had accomplished what they'd set out to do. They had exposed betrayal, delivered punishment, and sent a message to anyone else who might consider crossing them. But Roman wasn't finished with his WrestlePalooza 2025 statement. With Solo destroyed at their feet, he turned his attention to the WWE executives who had enabled and possibly orchestrated the entire poisoning plot. Nick Khan, Roman called out, knowing that WWE's president was watching from his corporate box high above the arena floor. I know you're up there counting your money and calculating how this affects your stock price. But here's what you need to understand, this is just the beginning. The threat directed at WWE's corporate leadership elevated the entire situation from personal family drama to corporate warfare. Roman was essentially declaring war on the company that had employed him for over a decade. Jacob and I have evidence that goes far beyond Solo's individual crimes, Roman announced, his words sending shockwaves through WWE's corporate structure. We have documentation of systematic abuse, deliberate endangerment of performers, and corporate policies designed to eliminate wrestlers who become inconvenient. The implications were staggering. If Roman and Jacob actually possessed the kind of evidence they were claiming, WWE could be facing legal consequences that would dwarf any previous wrestling-related lawsuits. Jacob Fatu stepped forward to add his own corporate threat. We have recordings, Fatu announced, his words hitting WWE's executive team like guided missiles. Phone calls between board members discussing how to handle the Roman problem. Executive meetings where they planned strategies for removing him from the championship picture permanently. The crowd was witnessing what might be the beginning of WWE's corporate downfall, orchestrated by two men who had been pushed beyond their breaking point and were now fighting back with every weapon at their disposal. But Roman's revenge plan extended beyond just Solo and WWE's corporate leadership. He had scores to settle with every member of the bloodline who had abandoned him during his hospitalization. Jimmy and GUSO, Roman's voice carried across the arena like a war declaration. I know you're back there too, probably trying to figure out how to distance yourselves from Solo's crimes while maintaining your own careers. But here's the thing, abandoning family in their hour of need is almost as bad as betraying them outright. The USO twins had been conspicuously absent from Roman's hospital bedside, choosing career preservation over family loyalty when their cousin needed them most. Now they were about to face consequences for that choice. You'll get your turn, Roman promised, his words carrying the weight of inevitable justice. Jacob and I are going to work our way through every single person who failed me when I was down. Every fake friend, every fair-weather family member, every corporate enabler who thought they could write me off and move on with their lives. The systematic nature of Roman's revenge plan was both impressive and terrifying. This wasn't random violence or emotional outburst, this was calculated warfare designed to destroy everyone who had wronged him. Jacob Fatu's presence as the new Shield member added credibility and menace to every threat Roman made. His massive physical presence, combined with his demonstrated loyalty during Roman's darkest hours, made him the perfect weapon for delivering justice to their enemies. Paul Heyman, Roman continued his list of people who would face consequences. You get special mention for being the biggest disappointment of all. 20 years you spent building your reputation as the advocate, the loyal manager who would never betray his clients. Then the moment I'm hospitalized and vulnerable, you start taking meetings with Cody Rhodes about representing him instead. The betrayal by Paul Heyman, Roman's longtime advocate and manager, represented professional abandonment at its most calculating. Heyman had built his career on loyalty to his clients, but apparently that loyalty evaporated the moment Roman's career seemed to be in jeopardy. We have photos, Jacob Fatu added, his words hitting Heyman like a physical blow. Pictures of you having dinner with Cody, discussing contract terms, planning storylines that assumed Roman would never be coming back. While your client was fighting for his life, you were already moving on to his replacement. The evidence that Fatu claimed to possess suggested that Roman and Jacob's revenge campaign was based on extensive documentation of their enemies' crimes and betrayals. They hadn't just stumbled upon evidence, they had systematically gathered ammunition for their war. But Roman's most devastating revelation was yet to come, the one that would complete WWE's corporate humiliation and expose the company's true priorities. You want to know the real reason WWE wanted me eliminated? Roman asked, his voice carrying the weight of explosive corporate secrets. You want to know why they were willing to risk murder charges and federal investigation to get rid of their so-called golden boy? The crowd held its collective breath, sensing that Roman was about to reveal information that would shake the wrestling industry to its core. Money, Roman said with disgust. Not storyline reasons, not creative differences, not even personal conflicts. They wanted me gone because I was making too much money, and they found younger, cheaper wrestlers they could exploit more effectively. The revelation that WWE's motivation for eliminating Roman was purely financial rather than creative added a layer of corporate callousness to the entire situation. They had been willing to commit serious crimes simply to save money on contracts and salaries. My guaranteed contract was eating into their profit margins, Roman continued, his words exposing WWE's priorities with brutal clarity. So they decided it would be cheaper to poison me and pay legal fees than to honor the deal they had signed. Jacob Fatu's corporate knowledge added credibility to Roman's financial allegations. We have the board meeting minutes, Fatu announced, his words sending panic through WWE's executive team. Detailed discussions about how eliminating Roman's salary would improve their quarterly profits and make their stock more attractive to investors. The systematic nature of WWE's alleged financial motivation for attempted murder painted the company as a corporate monster willing to commit any crime in pursuit of profit maximization. As WrestlePalooza 2025 reached its climax, Roman and Jacob stood in the center of the ring surrounded by the destruction they had wrought. Solo Sikoa lay motionless at their feet, their enemies cowered in backstage areas planning damage control strategies, and the wrestling world tried to process the magnitude of what they had witnessed. This is the new Shield, Roman announced, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had reclaimed control of his destiny through force and determination. Not the corporate manufactured version that WWE tried to create, not the family-friendly storyline that they used to sell merchandise. This is real loyalty, real brotherhood, real justice delivered by people who refuse to be victims. Jacob Fatu's presence beside Roman represented everything that the original Shield had promised but never delivered, genuine loyalty that couldn't be bought, manipulated, or corrupted by corporate interests. From now on, Roman continued, his words serving as both promise and threat, anyone who betrays family, anyone who chooses money over loyalty, anyone who thinks they can poison their way to success, will answer to us. The new Shield doesn't wrestle, we wage war. The crowd erupted in appreciation for what they had witnessed, not just athletic competition, but genuine justice delivered by men who had been pushed beyond their breaking point and fought back with everything they had. As Roman and Jacob raised their fists in victory over Solo's broken body, the wrestling world realized that WrestlePalooza 2025 had changed everything. The old rules no longer applied, corporate protection no longer mattered, and family betrayal would no longer go unpunished. The new Shield had delivered their message with brutal clarity. Payback time had arrived, and nobody who had wronged them would escape justice. The war for wrestling's soul had begun, and Roman Reigns had just fired the opening shot with his most loyal soldier by his side. Wrestling would never be the same again.